The Outer Space Treaty, formerly known as the Treaty on Principles Governing the Activities of States in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, is a treaty that forms the basis of international space law. Talks on preserving outer space for peaceful purposes began in the late 1950s at the United Nations. The United States and its Western allies submitted proposals in 1957 on reserving space exclusively for peaceful and scientific purposes, but the Soviet Union rejected these efforts because it was preparing to launch the world's first satellite, and test its first ICBM. In 1963, the UN General Assembly approved 2 resolutions on outer space that subsequently became the basis for the Outer Space Treaty. First, UN Resolution 1884 called on countries to refrain from stationing weapons of mass destruction in outer space. Second, UN Resolution 1962 set out legal principles on outer space exploration, which stipulated that all countries have the right to freely explore and use space. The United States and Soviet Union submitted separate draft for outer space treaties to the UN General Assembly in June 1966. A mutually agreed treaty text was worked out over the next 6 months, and the UN General Assembly gave its approval of the treaty on December 19, 1966. The treaty opened for signature in Washington, Moscow, and London on January 27, 1967, and entered into force October 10, 1967. As of May 2017, 106 countries are parties to the treaty, while another 24 have signed the treaty, but have not completed ratification. The Outer Space Treaty provides the basic framework on international space law. It has 17 articles in total, out of which first 13 are directly related to outer space, and 4 are related to procedural framework of the treaty, that is signature, withdrawal, and amendment of the treaty. We will only limit ourselves to first 13 articles of the treaty because of its relevance to outer space. The exploration and use of outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, shall be carried out for the benefit and in the interests of all countries, irrespective of their degree of economic or scientific development, and shall be the province of all mankind. Outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, shall be free for exploration and use by all states without discrimination of any kind, on a basis of equality, and in accordance with international law, and there shall be free access to all areas of celestial bodies. There shall be freedom of scientific investigation in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, and states shall facilitate and encourage international cooperation in such investigation. Outer space is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use, or occupation, or by any other means. States parties to the treaty shall carry on activities in the exploration and use of outer space, in accordance with international law, including the Charter of the United Nations, in the interest of maintaining international peace and security and promoting international cooperation and understanding. States parties to the treaty undertake not to place in orbit around the Earth any objects carrying nuclear weapons or any other kinds of weapons of mass destruction, install such weapons on celestial bodies, or station such weapons in outer space in any other manner. The establishment of military bases, installations and fortifications, the testing of any type of weapons and the conduct of military maneuvers on celestial bodies shall be forbidden. The use of military personnel for scientific research or for any other peaceful purposes shall not be prohibited. The use of any equipment or facility necessary for peaceful exploration of the Moon and other celestial bodies shall also not be prohibited. State parties to the treaty shall regard astronauts as envoys of mankind in outer space and shall render to them all possible assistance in the event of accident, distress, or emergency landing on the territory of another state party or on the high seas. When astronauts make such a landing, they shall be safely and promptly returned to the state of registry of their space vehicle. In carrying on activities in outer space and on celestial bodies, the astronauts of one state party shall render all possible assistance to the astronauts of other states parties. States parties to the treaty shall immediately inform the other states parties to the treaty or the Secretary General of the United Nations of any phenomena they discover in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, which could constitute a danger to the life or health of astronauts. States parties to the treaty shall bear international responsibility for national activities in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, whether such activities are carried on by governmental agencies or by non-governmental entities, and for assuring that national activities are carried out in conformity with the provisions set forth in the present treaty. The activities of non-governmental entities in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, shall require authorization and continuing supervision by the appropriate state party to the treaty. When activities are carried on in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies, by an international organization, responsibility for compliance with this treaty shall be borne both by the international organization and by the states parties to the treaty participating in such organization. Each state party to the treaty that launches or procures the launching of an object into outer space, and each state party from whose territory or facility an object is launched is internationally liable for damage to another state party to the treaty, or to its natural or juridical persons, by such object or its component parts on the Earth, in air or in outer space, including the Moon and other celestial bodies. A state party to the treaty on whose registry an object launched into outer space is carried shall retain jurisdiction and control over such object, and over any personnel thereof, while in outer space or on a celestial body. Ownership of objects launched into outer space, including objects landed or constructed on a celestial body, and of their component parts, is not affected by their presence in outer space or on a celestial body or by their return to the Earth. Such objects or component parts found beyond the limits of the state party to the treaty on whose registry they are carried shall be returned to that state party, which shall, upon request, furnish identifying data prior to their return. In the exploration and use of outer space, states parties to the treaty shall be guided by the principle of cooperation and mutual assistance, and shall conduct all their activities in outer space with due regard to the corresponding interests of all other states parties to the treaty. States parties to the treaty shall pursue studies of outer space, and conduct exploration of them so as to avoid the harmful contamination and also adverse changes in the environment of the Earth resulting from the introduction of extraterrestrial matter and, where necessary, shall adopt appropriate measures for this purpose. If a state party to the treaty has reason to believe that an activity or experiment planned by it or its nationals in outer space would cause potentially harmful interference with activities of other states parties in the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, it shall undertake appropriate international consultations before proceeding with any such activity or experiment. In order to promote international cooperation in the peaceful exploration and use of outer space, states parties to the treaty conducting activities in outer space agree to inform the Secretary-General of the United Nations as well as the public and the international scientific community, to the greatest extent feasible and practicable, of the nature, conduct, locations and results of such activities. On receiving the said information, the Secretary-General of the United Nations should be prepared to disseminate it immediately and effectively. All stations, installations, equipment and space vehicles on the Moon and other celestial bodies shall be open to representatives of other states parties to the treaty on a basis of reciprocity. Such representatives shall give reasonable advance notice of a projected visit, in order that appropriate consultations may be held and that maximum precautions may be taken to assure safety and to avoid interference with normal operations in the facility to be visited. The provisions of this treaty shall apply to the activities of states parties to the treaty in the exploration and use of outer space, whether such activities are carried on by a single state party to the treaty or jointly with other states, including cases where they are carried on within the framework of international intergovernmental organizations. Any practical questions arising in connection with activities carried on by international intergovernmental organizations in the exploration and use of outer space, shall be resolved by the states parties to the treaty either with the appropriate international organization or with one or more states members of that international organization, which are parties to this treaty. Human history is full of wars, massacres, violence and racism, but treaties like Outer Space Treaty unite us together for our mutual endeavors in outer space, thus giving us a ray of hope that peaceful coexistence is possible in this world. Let's just pray that peace shall prevail in our only home in the unfathomably large space.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
If you want us to improve the quality of our videos, and to frequently upload videos on YouTube, then please consider supporting us on Patreon. Earnings from YouTube are not enough, and thus we are asking you to help us on Patreon, so that we can focus full-time on YouTube. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and share.